Hi, my name is Max Aulakh with Ignyte, and I'm here with Ryan from GovDash. We're here to talk about their journey when it comes to cybersecurity, FedRAMP, and everything that goes into it. Ryan, welcome, and tell us a little bit about your journey. Tell us how you got started.
Yeah, so we've been working on helping to secure our infrastructure from the inception of the company, really, but that's something that's continued forward as we've had new requirements around FedRAMP. We spent the last year or so really trying to harden our infrastructure and make sure that we're following all of the best security practices so that we're going to be able to hold CUI and other kinds of sensitive data for our customers in the most secure way possible. We started out looking at some different managed options, and we found that the managed options really limited our ability to execute on speed and also didn't have the kind of ability that we needed to orient our security practices around the specific needs of our organization. And so those changes really led us to building our own infrastructure from the ground up. And we went and talked with a lot of different auditors and trying to figure out who is the best person for us to partner with throughout this process. And so now we've moved to the end and we are now FedRAMP moderate equivalent, and we're now able to hold that kind of data. We've got a dedicated security team to these efforts, and security is really like a key aspect of our organization at this point.
Ryan, that was awesome. There's a lot of information packed there. Sounds like you went through a big journey, right? But tell me about, I guess, when you started to build and analyze how are you going to deliver this. There's a lot of options on the market, right? You mentioned managed service and all this kind of stuff. Like, how did you determine the right choice for GovDash?
Yeah, so first and foremost, it was a question of how do we keep our information secure? And keeping everything secure was top of mind when we were selecting vendors for everything, from what cloud provider we're using, what auditor we're using, how we're managing our containers. All of that information, we were trying to look at it from a security perspective. And then going forward from a security perspective, we were thinking about compliance. So we are complying with the FedRAMP moderate controls to help support our CMMC customers. And that's something where we wanted to make sure that we were working with the right vendors. And so we started thinking about our auditors very early on and had initially wanted to go with one of the legacy auditors.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
What was that experience? Like, just the conversations. I've heard about a lot of these legacy auditors, a day late, dollar short. What was that like for you?
Yeah, so for us working with these older auditors, we found that they were extremely operations heavy, but that's not something that confers security or oftentimes compliance. There was a lot of back and forth, and it was an extremely slow, it felt like a litigious process really to go through an audit. And from our perspective, the objective of the audit is to demonstrate compliance and to demonstrate security. And that was something where we felt we were both being slowed down and engaged in an exercise of security theater, where our security practices weren't being markedly improved by virtue of going with one of these auditors. That's what I felt with Ignyte was different, because from the first call we were talking to you guys and you were really oriented around making sure that our environment was secure. And you were oriented around making sure that we were doing all of the right things, but it was super brass tacks. And I think that's something that matters when you're working with your auditors.
We appreciate that. Yeah, one of the things we look for, because we're pretty selective on our clients too. We have lots of over 100 clients. And I think what makes GovDash unique is your ability to balance security with speed. Because a lot of our clients, they want the features, the latest features. They want the latest version. They also want the latest frontier models. And our job as security practitioners is not to be the department of no, but how do you actually secure things, right? So when I think about all the great companies that are out today, they can build rockets in 6 months. Why does an ATO, why does security take a year? It just doesn't make sense. So how do you guys balance the security with speed? Because I think that's really important for today's market.
A lot of that comes down to baking security into the entire development practice from start to finish. We're a team of very talented developers at GovDash, and the developers are trained on the right kinds of security that they have to adopt from the beginning. So when we're trying to release a new feature, we're thinking about how do we keep security as part of that feature set from development all the way through deployment. And so that's helped us a lot too. And then when it comes to the compliance frameworks, I think selecting the right auditor is super important. because you want to be working with an auditor where when you have a significant change, you're working with somebody who's going to be friendly to that. Allows us to keep on top of that, always be using the latest models, for example, because we're an AI company and using the latest technology. And so between having developers that are super security conscious and baking that into the development practices and also working with the right partners, we're able to ensure that we've got the right kinds of security needs while also kind of balancing moving super quickly and launching new features.
That makes sense. Yeah, I think one of the things we always say in our company is like, focus on the material risk. In the age of GPT, anybody can generate paperwork. The key, is it accurate? And are we focusing on the material cyber risk? And so having auditors that understand development stack, that understand platform as service players, we've seen a lot out there, FedStop or something, there's a bunch of them. And what we've noticed is a continuous pattern of that. You might be highly secure, you've locked down all the windows, but there's no sunlight coming in. It's not flourishing and growing. I know you worked with us from an audit perspective, but how did you guys determine between controlling your own journey, getting hosted in somebody else's environment versus controlling that environment for yourself? What was that process like for you?
The decision boiled down to speed and security.
Okay.
So from a speed standpoint, we looked at using a managed FedRAMP environment.
Okay.
And the reason why we ended up not doing that is because on the surface, it seemed like a really great option. They said, oh, you're going to be on the marketplace in 3 months. And that was something that we felt was somewhat dubious because we don't have control over our own infrastructure. And not controlling our infrastructure might have gotten us to the marketplace faster, but the long-term consequences were that we'd now have to go through this external provider, and that would really slow us down. It hinders our ability to have the latest and greatest technology in the GovDash platform. And then that also, I think, invites a question of security, because from a security standpoint, having a dedicated security team and a dedicated infrastructure team enables us to really orient the decisions that we make around the needs of our customers and around the needs of our organization. And so we've made good security decisions there. And if you're going to go use an external service provider, you're typically paying a higher premium for that. And that premium usually is going to come at the cost of investing in security in your own organization.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. The way I look at it is you can either rent it or build equity and assets into your own company. So I see a lot of companies leveraging these platforms, but they can't, after they're invested in, they can't get off the platform. They're in a long-term contract, and then they end up building a secondary environment. And there's no parity between the two environments. And from a CTO perspective, it just complicates the whole thing. You're managing two code baselines, two environments, two different teams. So kudos to you guys for actually analyzing the decision and really figuring out the technology stack, because I see so many companies, they just want the quickest and the easiest answer, but not the right answer for a long-term growth perspective.
And quickest in the short term, but those costs really do hit you long-term. And especially when your organization is serving people in the defense space and people in government, you really want to make sure that both security and compliance are just baked into every aspect of your organization.
Yeah, one of the feedbacks we've gotten personally is, when organizations don't control the stack, they are 10 versions behind, or they're no longer, their feature set, their capabilities are no longer relevant to the actual problem. So I think GovDash overcame that through just giving people exactly what they need, but at the same time balancing the security.
And when you talk about that, I think that's a great point, because when you want to do a version upgrade on a certain product because of the needs of your organization necessitating it, whether it's a database upgrade, a model upgrade, or an upgrade to your infrastructure in any way, those are things that you have to have agency over to be able to do it, because otherwise you're going to be on somebody else's timeline. And that was something that we were really thinking about, because that would inhibit our ability to serve our customers. And so we really wanted to make sure that we were putting our customers first and putting our security first.
I think it's really important to understand from your perspective what the experience was like when you went through the audit, because it can be very stressful, right? People can feel like they're under a microscope, being interrogated unreasonably sometimes. What was that like for you?
That wasn't our experience at all.
Okay, awesome. That's good to hear.
Our auditor came from a technical background, which was super helpful because it meant that we were being asked questions about the security of our environment, and we were able to speak freely about them in a way that they would really comprehend. One of my fears going into an audit was that it was going to be a lot of questions about the framework, but not necessarily with a contextual understanding of the decisions that you make as a technologist. And so that was a concern, and it was a concern that was alleviated very quickly because I was talking to somebody who really understood our infrastructure and understood how you implement things under the hood. And so that experience was actually very pleasant. It felt like I finally had an opportunity to talk to somebody who understood a lot of the security framework and also understanding the technology. And so it ended up just being a, frankly, very pleasant conversation about a lot of the decisions that we made.
I know we have to do FedRAMP equivalency and CMMC and these kinds of things, but truth be told, a lot of these controls are very redundant, right? Yep. Overly burdensome sometimes, overly verbose. And I'm excited about this whole thing about the FedRAMP 20X process, which gets right to the heart of the matter. But yes, I think one of the things that we try to focus in on is the tech itself. Can you talk through how did you guys make the decision to go through FedRAMP equivalency versus CMMC? Just what was that analysis like?
Yeah, so the demand for FedRAMP came from our CMMC customers.
I see, okay.
Yeah, so obviously with the new regulations that came out enforcing CMMC on government contracts, a lot of our contractors who are our customers had to comply with it. And alongside that came the requirement that all of their software vendors have to be FedRAMPed, and that includes us because we're processing CUI. And so we started working backwards from that and said, okay, what do our compliance requirements look like? And we looked at, we don't do contracts with the government, and so we didn't have a pathway to FedRAMP Moderate solely on that merit. And so we were like, okay, what do? We saw the DoD's memo on FedRAMP Moderate equivalency, and that was clearly the path forward for us. FedRAMP Moderate equivalency requires all of the same controls as FedRAMP Moderate, but without an agency sponsor. And interestingly there too, not having an agency sponsor to assume any risk means that you've really got to have all of your ducks in a row. That put us in a good position where we were improving our security posture, and we were also making sure that we could serve all of our CMMC customers.
Awesome. All right, man, I think that was good. Any questions you want me to answer or anything like that?
I'd be really curious to hear what your experience was with us from an auditor's perspective.
Yeah, I think, so it was pleasant, of course, but we love people who are prior developers because they get right to the heart of the matter. But more than that, you guys understand the defense space. So what I find awesome about your organization is that you don't really have a lot of prior military people, but you understand the requirements better than people who do have military folks, which I think is incredible, right? It's really difficult to get a company who is funded by YC and then they understand the gov space. That's new. So I thought that was pretty refreshing. The other thing about our experience was really managing conflict of interest really well. We have organizations that come to us that they seem to think that if they have SOC 2 or ISO or CMMC, they can just take what they have and somehow have high assurance for FedRAMP, moderate equivalency or whatever. So we didn't experience any of that, which was great. And then the last thing I'll say is high ethics. We do come across a lot of organizations. Somehow they'll tie our contract and the invoicing to the outcome of the audit when that is not right. So we didn't feel any of that pressure. So I think it was a great experience from ethics, trust, as well as capability standpoint where the team actually knows how to do security. So it was fantastic from an audit standpoint because we are under the pressure to deliver a report that reflects the true risk of the posture. And that can be daunting. You might feel the pressure from stress from, I gotta make sure I get it right. But we feel the pressure from, are we being truthful? Are we upholding our integrity, our values? And you guys didn't come across as threatening to those at all. So
yeah, we appreciate that. We take our security very seriously and we take operating with integrity very seriously. So it's definitely something that matters to us. And it's apparent that it matters to you guys too. I think that's why this partnership has worked out so well.
Awesome.